If you are about to do an epoxy project, then you are on the right video, because I will show you in this video in real time how to put epoxy on a tabletop, a countertop, anything you want to epoxy. Stick around to the end because I do give you a little bit of a tip on the second coat or the flood coat. So let's get started. Hey everyone, it's Mimsy here. Today I'm working on this tulip table project. I bought this tulip base at an auction for $5. It was a few years ago. I'm pretty sure it's just an IKEA, but I like the shape of it. You know, it's just a reproduction Saarinen table. And I love a round table because you can fit so many people at it. I've had this tulip table in my garage for a number of years, trying to figure out how to make a round tabletop for it. So I went back and forth on how to make a round tabletop for it. I was at an auction or an estate sale probably 6 months ago and happened upon this 60-inch round tabletop. It's probably about a ½ an inch thick, and it's got a piano hinge on it. I'm sure somebody probably kept it to be able to put over the top of another table to make a bigger table, or just have coverage for a very special table. I don't know. I happened upon the estate sale, and it was the last day of the estate sale. It was Sunday, so it was free day, and I spotted this in the garage, leaning up against the wall behind some tools and stuff like that. When I saw it, I thought, oh my gosh, this could possibly be my tabletop for this. And so I grabbed it, and sure enough, it's a 60-inch round tabletop. So I am going to use this. I'm going to take the piano hinge off. I will pocket drill the table together, and I'll put it on top of this one. That's the story about how all this came together. I'm going to show you how I'm going to fasten this all together. So let's get started. Now it's time to take the piano hinge off of here. So unscrew a boatload of tiny screws. Okay, so this is how I'm going to secure it. So this tabletop has these 6 of these holes. So since that tabletop is MDF tabletop, I don't want to just put screws in here, because I feel like when people lean on the table, it could potentially just strip the threads right out of the MDF, because MDF is not super sturdy. What I decided to do, I bought carriage bolts, and I'm going to put them into the MDF and through the table, and then I'll use a washer and a nut to fasten them underneath the table. So when the MDF is on here, I'll countersink the head of the carriage bolts and do it like that. So, okay, so there they are. This one I just about blew through the whole thing. That one is perfect. Just got a tiny bit drilled out, just enough for the head of the carriage bolt to fit in there. And remember, when you fasten your carriage bolts, it's going to pull down and basically lock into place with that square piece there. I filled all the screw holes and the seam in the center where the piano hinge was, and now I'm getting ready to paint. Let me show you how I attached the table to the base. I used carriage bolts, and I attached the table base, the tulip base, to this MDF, 3/4 inch MDF, and then I put the tabletop on top of that. The carriage bolts were extra long. I need to cut those off, but now I'm going to spray paint the base and then start on the epoxy on the top. I'm going to put a coat of white paint on the top, and then I'm going to paint the bottom of the table charcoal gray, almost black. I'm going to start with this primer, which is just a straight primer, because then I'm going to top coat with this gold metallic, and metallics generally don't have a very good coverage. So prime with this. Okay, and let that dry for about an hour or so. So when you're using metallic paints, you want to do your painting in a sweeping motion, back and forth in a sweeping motion, in order so that the sheen comes out the same. Otherwise you end up with splotchiness. You don't want that. You want the sheen to all be nice and even. Okay, so I've got my table all painted. I've got 2 or 3 coats of the white base coat on the table, and it's sufficiently dry for 24 hours. So I'm ready to start my epoxy. So before you start mixing your epoxy, you want to make sure you have all your supplies on hand, because you don't want to get your epoxy mixed up and poured out on the table, or mixed up and ready to pour out on the table, and you don't have all your supplies. Make sure that you have all of your spray paints that you're going to use. Make sure they're all shaken up before you start mixing your epoxy. You want to make sure you've got plenty of paint sticks. Whatever it is that you're going to use to spread your epoxy, your spreader, or you can use a foam roller or even a brush. So you want to make sure you have a brush so that if you want to do pounding or whatever, you want to use your brush to spread your paint, then you want to have a brush for sure. Make sure that you have your heat gun ready, it's plugged in and it's not glued off. Maybe a towel, a hand towel, and don't forget your gloves, your plastic gloves, latex gloves. I think that's it. Just make sure that you've got all your supplies on hand before you get mixing on your epoxy. Let's start mixing. I've got my resin in this bucket, my cure in this bucket. I was going to mix it in this, but I realized that it's not going to be quite big enough. So I went and grabbed this bucket here. The important thing about your bucket is that you make sure that your bucket doesn't have any ridges or grooves on the inside, that it's a completely smooth inside surface. So don't use anything like a coffee can or something that you have laying around, because you don't want one or the other part to get stuck in a groove or something and not mix properly. I'm going to put the thin stuff in first, which is the cure. Oops, I just dripped it on the table. So put the cure into your bucket first, and then put the resin in, because the resin's thicker and wants to sit on the bottom anyhow. So put that in, and this is the goopy stuff. And make sure you scrape it all out. Because it has to be exactly 1 to 1. All right, now we're gonna mix this for 3 to 5 minutes. And I've had this in my house for a while, so it's at the perfect temperature, which I believe is like 70 degrees Fahrenheit or something like that. It tells you on the bottle what the perfect temperature is. So make sure that you look at that and try to get your epoxy in that range, because if it's too warm, it does something weird and wants to separate. If it's too cold, it won't mix properly either. So you really want to keep your epoxy at the proper temperature. Okay, so that's the time. And I've got a couple spots here where it was wanting to separate, which you'll get a few areas where you'll get voids and divots, and that will mostly be remedied by the second coat. Now I've got that fairly well spread out. Now I'm going to pour some gray, spray some gray into this bucket. What I'm doing is just spraying some white spray paint into here. And then flat. Just a hair of that. I just want it to be gray. Don't want it to be real dark. Okay, now I think I'll start over here where I had that hole. And go right over that. dry off this way. Okay, and I'm pretty sure that's kind of all I'm going to do. And I'm going to just manipulate this so that it doesn't look like puddles. But more like striations. This. Okay, so I've got the general guideline down. I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to just kind of do this to even blend these bits out even more. And I'm going to kind of pick some of this up. That. Chop this up a little bit so that it doesn't have such a defined edge. Okay, so that looks good. Now I'm going to add in a little bit of gold, I think. You know what? I think I'm going to go ahead, and since I've got my brush loaded with this and it's really a light, I think I'm going to go ahead and just add in some really, really subtle color on this side here, so it's not completely white. Okay, got a little bit of the black, straight black paint there, so I'm just going to chop that up a bit. And I like to have more of a drag effect instead of it being like just dots. That. Do a little bit of that over here. I'm going to make this side really super subtle, so I'm just going to really blend that out. And a little bit here, which I'm going to really blend out. Get a little bit of the corner. A tiny bit here. Okay, so that looks good. Now let me get a little bit of gold on there. Okay. So, I've got a little bit of gold in here, and I've still got my little bit of epoxy still in the bucket, but that's how that's looking. So it's kind of mixed together, which is totally fine. And the gold has kind of a different effect. It separates different than the other paint colors. Okay. Big clump there, so I'll just drag that out. And you know what I think I'll do? Is I'll do another little vein separating right there from that spot. Okay, so I like that. I like that a lot. So that looks pretty great as it is. Let me drag a little bit of that gold in places so we don't have any puddles, because there's a couple spots where it just did kind of a pooling thing here. You know what I think I'll do? I'll just kind of make this that a lot. This little spot here where it's just a droplet, I will pull that to make it look like that's the juncture of a vein line, and this little pooling spot here, we'll drag some of that out. And drag that out a little bit, make that like a okay, now I'm going to try a little bit of rubbing alcohol on here. So I'm going to show you this close up as it is right now. I haven't done the rubbing alcohol yet, so I'm going to brighten this up a little bit. Okay, so here's the way it's looking right now, but let me bring you in close so you can see. It needs to be brighter still. Anyway, I am going to... Alright, so here it is close up. You can see how the gray has a lot of variation in there, and how it's like separating in little spots here. Anyway, there's the way that looks. Going to get some rubbing alcohol into my spray bottle and then hit this a little bit with the rubbing alcohol and see if I can get a little bit of separation on the gray. But you see how the gold, let's see if I can get this to, so you can see how the gold does this different separation thing here. See how you can see that it does something different there, the metallic paint, and it's really cool and I really like it. Okay, so I've got the rubbing alcohol in this bottle, and I'm going to go ahead and just do a small spray of it there. And I'm just going to watch, because this is actually the first time I've done the rubbing alcohol method, because, you know, this has all kind of been through COVID and you couldn't find it anywhere. A little bit there. There. Okay, I really like this just like it is. Just two colors on here. Well, the gray and the white mixed till I got it to the gray that I wanted, and then the gold. So I'm going to hit this with my heat gun, get some of these bubbles out, and take out some of the rubbing alcohol. And then you can also kind of manipulate your paints as well. So I can move this around a bit. So I see a lot of little divots on here that look like bubbles that popped and then it didn't flatten out yet. So I'm just going to hit it again pretty close, see if I can get those to go away. And then anything that's left, any divots or dimples, will be covered with a second coat of epoxy, which I guess is called the flood coat in the biz. And there's a lot of drips on the bottom of the table, which I'll grab those here in just a sec. Okay. Get some of these drips off of here. I'll go around and drag some of these drips off here a couple times. And you know what I think I might do? I might just go ahead and see if I can get a little bit more gold on there. Just gonna get a couple. Real thin and I just lumped it up. That's okay. Just drag that out and I'll hit it with the heat gun and it'll be just fine. Perfect. Okay, so let's see. Let me zoom out. Okay, so there's the whole table. Let me bring you in a little bit closer so you can see the way that it looks. I've got a little bit of gray out on the outskirts on both sides. So bring it back here. Let's see if I can get, see this? See if I can get it from the top. The gold does a weird thing that I really like. It does this separation thing. So, that's the way it looks. So the reason why you need a second coat is because the areas where you put the color, I'm trying to make it so you can see it, but it's almost like the epoxy is thicker there, and so there's like a lump. And so that's why you have to put the flood coat on, because the flood coat really levels out the whole tabletop.